So here we are, economies of scale. So a very important issue in business and economics. Something which we say all the time in analysis in terms of why is it good to grow, and therefore it's such an important video to watch. So what is it? Basically, as output increases, average cost of production decreases. What you got to think is economies of scale is just saying bigger businesses can be more efficient, okay? And just have that understanding. And it's a key barrier to entry for new firms entering a market. How do you enter a market and compete with big businesses that are that much more efficient because they're larger? So it's a real key barrier to entry and a real advantage to those large established businesses. I often use the example of, say, if I want to be a juice maker and I open up a market stall where I'm hand squeezing orange juice, and I'm selling it, and I'm trying to compare my unit costs of making one product to, say, a huge business like Tropicana, who has huge machinery, huge bulk buying orders, maybe their own farms, where they're on an industrial level producing orange juice, and I've got to work out how much it costs them to produce 1 litre of orange juice compared to how much it costs me to produce 1 litre of orange juice, and they're going to be able to do it much cheaper. And that's really the essence of economies of scale. So we draw this diagram here where y-axis is average cost of production, so total cost divided by the quantity that you make. And then x-axis is output. And the further we go down the x-axis, the larger the business is. So economies of scale is actually really this half of the diagram. And we have a curve where as the business gets bigger, average cost of production goes down. And then at its lowest point here, this is the most efficient point on the diagram. This is the minimum efficient scale, okay? So as you see, the cost of making 1 unit at this size is C. The cost of making 1 unit at this scale, this size, is C1. And we want to keep costs as low as possible because we're profit maximizers. Total revenue minus total costs equal profit. So if we can manufacture products cheaper, we're going to make more profit. So that's really the scale at which our business should be in terms of its minimum efficient scale, the best efficiency to keep costs down. Okay, so how does a business actually make things cheaper just because they're bigger? Well, to do that, we've got to look at internal economies of scale. So first of all, we can have technical economies of scale, which is they've got better capital. They've got bigger machines, better machines. I just said that I've got a hand squeezer making my orange juice, and Tropicana has this huge industrial press, and they're going to be able to do thousands and thousands of litres per hour when I'm able to do, 5 litres per hour. So it's their capital that makes them more efficient. They'll also have managerial economies of scale. In a small business, I'll be trying to be a jack of all trades. I'll be the finance director, I'll be the marketing director, and I'm doing every job that little bit worse because I'm not a specialist in it. When Tropicana, they'll have people who have the exact skills, qualifications, and experience to do a very specific job. Purchasing economies of scale. This is the element of bulk buying. If I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to sell 10 litres of orange juice today, I need to go out and I need to buy 50 oranges. Well, I contact a farmer or a wholesaler and I'm like, right, I need to buy 50 oranges per day. When Tropicana is like, right, we need 50,000 oranges, they're going to get a better price because whoever is selling it to them is able to bring in more revenue quicker by selling a larger order. So bulk buying, you'll be able to buy each orange cheaper. Financial economies of scale. Banks will give out loans to big businesses with lower levels of interest. A big business is not as risky as a small business. They've got more security in terms of assets, so if they weren't able to pay back, they'd be able to sell assets. And they've got a track record of success. A small business might be quite young, and therefore a bank actually sees them as a higher risk. And if a bank sees someone as a higher risk, they're going to want more reward. Okay, so you'll actually have financial economies of scale where you'll have less expenses on interest if you're bigger. And then marketing economies of scale, essentially you've got cost-effective advertising. If I put a billboard on the side of a motorway and I'm a huge business with a huge target market, people going past are seeing this billboard and it's effective advertising. If I'm a small business, it's very hard to get effective advertising, and advertising can be very expensive, and if I'm struggling to hit my target market because I'm a small business, then it's going to be a waste of money. So in terms of marketing economies of scale, it's just where those marketing costs spread across a larger target market and more output is that much more effective. Okay, so that's internal, how the business becomes bigger and benefits itself. Now, we can also have external economies of scale, which is when there are cost advantages as a result of the industry getting bigger. So, by this I mean, imagine Subway going to a food court with other competitors. Imagine this area here, I'm working in the education area where there's lots of schools in the same area. And essentially the whole industry has become bigger. And so they will also achieve cost savings. This is external economies of scale. Now, by locating yourself amongst other businesses in the same industry, you're going to get advantages which will actually lower your average costs. So if there's lots of businesses on an industrial estate, the government might install better infrastructure, better highways, better train networks, better public transport, better communications, like better broadband cables, whatever it is. And that can always improve your costs. Therefore, infrastructure is one way in which you can achieve external economies of scale. If we look at places like Silicon Valley, where we've got a lot of the tech companies in California, essentially that industry's gotten bigger over in Silicon Valley, and so now IT graduates know that they need to go there for work. And so in fact, those companies in Silicon Valley should be able to attract the right skilled labour they need. And so that's another advantage of the whole industry getting bigger in that area, the fact that you're getting skilled staff. And then lastly, I give you the example of the food court, Subway going to the food court. Well, basically, if customers know where to find the products, you'll have, maybe there's less advertising to do because you know, right, I need to go get my lunch, I'm going to go to the food court. So that whole businesses moving into that area is actually going to help out the business. It's kind of cooperation rather than competition. But that's the last way of achieving external economies of scale. So whether it's, the most common you're going to talk about is internal. How does the business get bigger itself and therefore save money? But we must also consider how the industry gets bigger and that also gives benefits to the business. Okay, last thing in this section, this diagram here, I'd take you down to Q2, which is the minimum efficient scale, but what about when the curve starts to rise again? This section of the curve is actually diseconomies of scale. What's happening here is output goes beyond the minimum efficient scale, and as we can see, the average cost of production starts to increase. As output increases, the cost of production increase beyond this point here, okay? The reason for that is basically the business has become too big. Now, if the business becomes too big, it's very hard to keep workers on track. How do we know they're doing their job? So what we do is we incorporate quite a lot of paperwork into our systems, into our management systems. And sometimes this actually slows things down. If I'm getting somebody to fill out a form to say that they have done something, we could describe it as bureaucratic, lots of paperwork, okay? So a bureau in French is like a desk, you know, like something that stores lots of paper. And so we've got this word bureaucracy, which is lots of paperwork to make sure people are doing their jobs. And if we've got a big company, we need to incorporate more bureaucracy because we can't trust the people to do their jobs. There will be a lack of motivation. Workers will feel like they're just a big cog in a huge machine. If we compare that to a small business, when you can directly see the impact your output is having, your productivity is having on the business, you're not going to see that if you're working for a Coca-Cola or a Tropicana. So staff won't be as motivated, not going to be getting as much job enrichment. Also, when businesses get too big, we're going to have a long chain of command, a huge hierarchy, and then there's going to be communication problems. Slow communication, distorted communication, and essentially we're going to become more inefficient. So we don't necessarily have direct examples of businesses in real life that are in diseconomies of scale, and to be honest, it's impossible to identify. Really, you know, when do these start, the problems of these diseconomies of scale start outweighing the benefits of internal economies of scale? Is too hard to measure. But essentially, we don't necessarily say businesses are achieving that, but we always evaluate by saying, in growth, a benefit of growth is economies of scale, evaluate, however, diseconomies of scale could happen. So it's always there as our kind of key counterbalance to when we're saying why growing's good.